Hi, this is Urban Knish. Today I'm going to talk about the Retrode 2, which allows you to play ROMs on your computer legally. Now, this could be a gray area. Some people don't agree that it's legal to rip your own ROMs, but I think the consensus, especially in the retro gaming community, is that if you own the cartridge, it's okay to back it up. You're not selling it. You're not sharing it with your friends. You're just using it and preserving your cart. So, the first thing that you're going to need to do this for most of the retro games is get a Retrode. There's a company that made Retrode and they stopped making it. They gave the rights to Dragon Box. Now Dragon Box sells it. It's called the Retrode 2. You could do Sega Genesis, Sega Master System. You could do Nintendo Gameboy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, Super Nintendo. And you could also do Nintendo 64. So I bought one on this website, Dragon Box Shop, and I bought the bundle that came with the plugins. Now, I don't own any Master System games anymore. I sold them a while ago, which was kind of stupid, but whatever. And so I just kind of put that one to the side. But I bought the package with everything. So I'm going to go over a little bit of how it works on a Mac. Now, very similar when you do it with a PC or Windows. So in this case, for the Mac, I'm using OpenEMU, which allows me to run a whole plethora of emulation software in one place without any complications. You just drag and drop your files, you rip them, you drag them here, they play. Very simple. So let's get started. First, I'm going to put a game in my Retrode. So we'll start with, let's start with the Genesis. So let me make sure my voltage is in the appropriate place. There's a 3 volt and a 5 volt. Put it on 5 volt. 5 volt works for everything but Nintendo 64 and Game Boy Advance. So I'm going to put in a game cartridge. I'm putting in the Punisher. Now, one of the criticisms I have of this thing is it's really hard to put the game cartridges in for the Genesis. So if you're using a plug-in or a Genesis cart, it's really difficult to get those in there. But, you know, it does work excellent. So I put the Genesis cart in. So the first thing I want to do is hit the reset on the Retrode. And then that's going to refresh the ROM. So I have my The Punisher ROM right here, and that's the name that it extracts. I don't know if it's built into the cartridge. I don't really know what it's doing, if it's grabbing that name from the web. I'm assuming it's on the cartridge. So I'm going to copy these onto the computer, because basically I could run this Punisher file right from the cartridge in the emulator. The problem is that, number one, it's not backed up, and number two, it takes a while to launch. So it's going to read that off basically you'll see how slow it is when it copies. So we'll copy it here, and then however long it takes to do this, that's how long it would take to launch in the emulator. So the first thing I'm going to do is copy all my files here from the cartridges, and then I'm going to launch them with the emulator. So that's the Punisher. So let's do the Game Boy. So I'm going to grab my Retrode plugin. I'm going to run Snow Brothers. So I'm going to plug that in the Genesis slot, and I'm going to hit the refresh. I know usually when you see on a Mac disk not ejected properly, it's usually a concern if it's a hard drive, but this is a read-only device, so I'm not really worried about it. Double click. It's a tiny file. It should take a second. Okay. Now I'm going to put in Game Boy Color. We'll put in Wario Land 2. Reset. This one has a game save. Okay, it takes a minute here. The Retrode system itself is USB 2.0, but it does have to extract the ROM off the cartridge, so it does take a little bit of time. And then you'll see with when I do the Nintendo 64 and the Game Boy Advance, it takes even longer because the files are bigger. So I'm going to pull that plug-in out. And next we're going to do a Game Boy Advance. So I'm going to flip. So for these next two, we're going to use 3 volts. Flip that over. Oops. Game Boy Advance. Reset. Showing here. So I have all my Game Boy games saved in this corner. And then the next one will be Bomberman 64. Another criticism on the Nintendo 64 plug-in, the area where you plug the cartridge in, it's getting a little wobbly, which is not cool. I mean, you know this thing's going to break. So that's one criticism I have. I brought in my whole Nintendo 64 collection, and by the time I got done, the thing is kind of beat up. You'd think that it'd be good for, permanent, that you could just keep running them like this. I mean, I think for a lot of people, the intention is to play them off the cartridge, play them right in the Retrode and not use a backup. But I don't really know if that's a good idea, especially when it comes to the Nintendo 64. So let's plug that in. One feature that the Nintendo 64 has, the plug-in has, is that you could plug your Nintendo 64 controller right into the Retrode and then play it on your computer, which is kind of cool. So here's my Bomberman cart. Drag it up. So as soon as this is done, we'll try to launch them in the emulator and see how they run. Now, I could say one thing about the Mac. Emulation is really spotty. Even on my MacBook Pro, which is a brand new computer, it's pretty powerful for a Mac, it was lagging with both Snow Brothers on a previous try and the Bomberman game. Very disappointing. Now, when I ran those same ROMs in Windows, they ran great. So take what you will of that. If you're doing this on a Mac, it's not perfect. So let's start with the Punisher. So we'll run that with OpenEMU. See how this works. Great sound. Then, of course, we can change the filters. Okay, we could see that works. Now we'll do the Bomberman. First, it's going to give us a warning that the emulator isn't stable. And we'll definitely be able to confirm that once this runs. Let me check my controller here. I think this looks pretty good. And I'm not seeing any issues. So now I'm not really sure why the MacBook Pro is having a problem. Could be a RAM situation. I'm running this in a lowly Mac Mini, but the Mac Mini has 16 gigabytes of RAM. I don't know. So let's grab. So we looked at the. Let's grab the Game Boy Advance. Got to admit, this is pretty amazing. I mean, we're running it right off of the, we pulled this off the cartridge just a few minutes ago, and it's running and it's all backed up, and my cartridges are sitting in a neat little pile, all nice and safe. Very cool. Now that's not running so great, is it? Or maybe that's the noise. Yeah, I guess that's how it works. Okay, let's grab the other one. This is one of the games that ran slow on the MacBook Pro. To me, this seems like it's running slow. So you get the picture. It's a really great system, the Retrode. The emulation side, obviously there's always going to be bugs. But as far as the Retrode itself is concerned, it was able to rip the games perfectly without any errors, and the system was able to recognize them. So I think it's fantastic. Recommend it to anybody who's looking to run legal emulation. In conclusion, I would recommend the Retrode 2. I think it's a great little system. You can plug your controllers in here and run them on your emulators. It's small, doesn't take up a lot of space, has a nice little cover on the top, and it stores well. So that's it. Please subscribe and like the video. That would really help me. Thank you.